Hi, friends, it's John Moore here, and I am a shamanic teacher and practitioner in the state of Maine in the US, but I have clients and students all over the world. And today I want to talk to you about shamanic beliefs and what are the belief systems of shamans, or if you're interested in shamanism, how does that affect your belief system? If you're going to see a shaman, does your belief system matter or not? So we'll break all of that down a little bit. So I think it's important to understand that shamanism always happens in a cultural context. Shamanism is not a religion, so there's no dogma, there's no book, there's nothing along those lines, right? So shamanism is a set of spiritual practices that are common across cultures, but there are some beliefs that make shamanism work, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So somebody who is a shaman in South America might have structured their belief system very differently than somebody who is a shaman in West Africa, for example. However, a lot of the things that they're experiencing are going to be the same. They probably are going to use very similar language, but slightly, obviously different languages, but the way they describe things is going to be slightly different. So let me break it down a little bit. Shamanism comes out of animism. And animism is basically a belief in spirits that inhabit the world. So beyond believing that human beings and other animate beings have spirits, animism also believes that there are spirits in things like trees and rocks and rivers and the sky, and things that we might not, from a Western science perspective, consider living, still have spirits or are spirits. So an animistic belief system is, if you don't go into shamanism with one, very quickly shamanism is going to show you're going to experience through shamanic journeying, things like that, you're going to experience the spirit world very rapidly, almost immediately. So if that conflicts with your belief system, I don't know, that's going to be a challenge, right? So shamans believe that there are spirits. They believe that there's non-physical beings, but also another core belief amongst all cultures that are shamanic is that there are other worlds, or at least an other world, a spirit world, right? It's not just that spirits inhabit our world, but there are other worlds where these spirits come from, and shamans are equipped to journey into those other worlds. Now, this is cross-cultural. It's very common. If you look at like Greek and Roman myths, there are lots of stories about venturing into the underworld to retrieve someone or retrieve something. Norse myths, the same thing. Odin going into Helheim, or raising somebody from the dead to find out the secrets of Seth or Galder. So there are all kinds of cultures that have this sort of shamanic idea because it survived. It survived even through things like Christianization, or which is when the Roman Christian Church came through, they destroyed all pagan temples. They burned down, well, not the Christians, but the Romans themselves burned down all the Druid groves. So these, a lot of these old ways were stamped out as people were forced into religious systems by governments, basically, at that time. So, but these things have persisted and they've lived on, and even in Christianity, where they consider hell, down there, right, the lower world, that's a remnant of the land of the dead being below the earth, which for some cultures that is a truth. Like hell or Helheim is where the dead go that don't go to Valhalla with Odin, or go to, I forget the name of the realm, where the hall where Freya actually gets the first choice. So, this is, again, lots and lots of common, we might say, things coming up out of the collective unconscious that are filtered through different cultures. But shamans are always a product of their culture, for one thing. However, there are cultures that are more shamanic, tribal cultures, for example, or cultures that are, are sort of not monotheistic cultures, can be very shamanic. But there are in some ways shamanic monotheists as well. So shamanism in general does not necessarily conflict with other people's belief systems. Many people can reconcile these things. I know lots of people who are Christian or Jewish or Buddhist, or in other forms of religion, or spiritual but not religious, who practice shamanism and have no issue with that whatsoever. Because there's unless you're studying shamanism from a particular culture which is geared towards particular deity worship, there is no deity in shamanism. That's not to say that shamans don't believe in a creator spirit or divinity or that sort of thing, or that we don't experience many what people consider gods and goddesses in our journeys. It's just that there's no defined, there's no Bible of shamanism, so there's not that. So there's animism, super important to shamanic belief system. The other thing is you'll experience, and if you don't go into shamanism, you will experience this rather quickly. There is an interconnection between all things, and that can be one way of experiencing divinity, is that I am connected to you, I'm connected to the natural environment, I'm connected to my ancestors, I'm connected to the planet I live on, I'm connected to the solar system I live in and the universe I live in. These things are not really separable. The separation, the view of separate things, is a product of ego and that sort of process. And you can get to a point where you recognize that as such, while still being in a body, still experiencing life through this body mind. Okay, but underneath it all, there is a unity, there's a oneness, and this again is spoken about in many different religious systems or spiritual systems. This is spoken about. So, if you are going to see a shamanic healer, how does belief interact with that? And is it important that you have the same exact belief system as the shamanic healer? And the answer to that is no, you do not have to have the same exact belief system, but you should. It would be helpful to be open to, open to it, because, part of what shamanic healing is psychological, right? When you go to see someone and they talk to you and you go through ceremonies, yes, they're doing spiritual healing with you. Part of that is psychological, the psycho-spiritual, but the body, mind, and spirit are not really separate things. It's just this continuum of being that interpenetrates and interacts. It's like the organs in your body. You can't take the heart out of your body and continue along. Like you can separate them mechanically, but this is all interacting as one unit, and the same is true for your body, mind, and spirit. It's all interacting as a single unit, and very, very complex, right? Very, very complex. The soul is complex, the energy body is complex, the spirit is complex. You also have a mental body and an emotional body and all of these different layers to who you are. So you should, if you're like, I don't believe in this, or I don't know, I'm not open to this, that might affect your healing. Psychologically, you could reject any healing that's come through. Or if part of the healing is psychological, that might hinder that process. If I don't believe in the value of therapy, for example, and I go to a therapist, that is going to taint the interaction there, right? And taint my ability to heal and get better. So The same is kind of true. You don't have to believe the same thing, but you should be open at least to the process of spiritual healing if you're going to a shaman for healing ceremony. You don't have to understand what they're doing. You don't have to understand how it works. When I work with clients, I tend to explain everything to them. I think informed consent is important. I'm going to do this ceremony for you. This is how it may affect you, that sort of thing. So where should you be if you are, let's say, I'm really interested in shamanism and I want to, go take an introductory class or contact a mentor like me and potentially do some learning one-on-one. You only have to be open and be open to the idea that this could work for you. What happens with nearly every single student that learns with me is in the very beginning, as they're learning how to journey and experiencing the spirit world and communicating with spirits, and which happens from session 1, right? Session 1 with me, you are going to learn how to journey. You're going to meet your first helping spirit. You're going to start communicating with that spirit. It is a very natural reaction for people to say, am I making this all up? I think nearly 100% of my students has asked me at some point, how do I know if I'm not making all of this up? And my answer to that is, you don't yet. You don't know yet if you're making this up. But what I promise will happen is there will come a point where something will happen where you'll realize I could not possibly be making all of this up. Like I'm getting information that I didn't have access to, or healing is coming through in a way that I didn't have access to before, or changes in the environment, or incredible meaningful experiences are happening. But in the beginning, it's so unusual. It's so somewhat alien to our day-to-day experience to sit across from a spirit and have a talk with it, or go into other spirit realms. You're like, well, maybe I'm making this all up in my imagination. And again, I'm not going to force you to believe anything. I can tell you that it is healthy to question these things. It's healthy, I think, to say, I don't know if I'm making all of this up, but I'm going to take it for checking, is what we call it. Take it for checking. I'm going to take it and I'm going to check on it. I am not going to base any major life decisions on the information I'm getting from spirit until I'm confident that that information is good, that it's coming from sources I trust, that it's not just wishful thinking or whatever. But let me talk about the imagination for a moment, because shamanism involves journeying into spirit realms and communicating with spirits, right? How do I know that's not in my imagination? And my answer to that is, it is in you. You are using your capacity, the capacity for imagination. That doesn't mean it's not real. Right now, you are seeing and hearing me, but that is just an image on your screen and sound coming out of your speakers, right? That's not real. You're not seeing me. But your capacity to take in information and turn that into the subjective experience of hearing somebody talk and seeing somebody talk, that is still real. It's still real. So when we journey, yes, we are using our capacity to visualize, but we're not in control of that. We're not saying, I'm going to picture an apple in my mind and an apple comes up. Once we've primed the pump, the images are coming up into our consciousness spontaneously, and we are witnessing them. But in the beginning, you'll question it. Most people do. And I think that's healthy. And I think that's totally fine until it takes a while to build confidence in your ability. And what happened for me in the beginning, when I was in my early on in my shamanic training, I was learning how to do divination. And I thought to myself, I don't really want to do divination, because what if I'm making all of this up and I give somebody some incorrect information and they do something based on that information, and so I thought I didn't want to do it. And then it turned out I really enjoyed it, and I was giving people answers for things that I didn't have information for, and also sometimes that they didn't have information for. So an example of that is somebody was asking me about where they might move to, right? And they were thinking about moving to Bangladesh, and I saw snow and, headed in a certain direction from where we were, and I saw animals in the area, and I'm like, I'm getting this real like Scandinavia feeling, and that wasn't even on the radar for this person. It wasn't even an option at this point. And then the person wound up moving to Scandinavia some months later and emailed me about it. So that's one small example. There have been some bigger ones as well. I can't give away too much information about anybody I've worked with, but where you start to get information that I didn't have this information and the person I'm working with didn't have this information, and then there's confirmations in the background, and on the back end afterwards you get confirmation about it. And so that starts to build your confidence and your ability to get information from spirit. So that's really helpful as well. So, but you don't have to set that aside in the beginning. You don't have to set skepticism aside to practice shamanism. So let me talk a little bit about shamanism and other belief systems. So, and I have to be very blanket here because there are, something like 14,000 different recognized religions in the world at this moment in time, and over 1,000 sects of Christianity alone. So I'm going to be very generic and paint with a very broad paintbrush here. But let's say you're interested in shamanism or going to a shamanic healer or learning shamanism, and you are a religious person. There is no problem from shamanism's perspective, because there is no dogma from you keeping your religion and practicing shamanism. The only problem comes when it is the other way around, when your religion somehow forbids the practice of shamanism, divination, consorting with spirits, doing spiritual healing, any of those things. And that might be the case. But that being said, I've had clients who have come to me and that I've worked with who have told me like, oh, this is actually against my religion working with you. And I'm like, well, that's not a problem for me. That's only a problem for you, potentially, if you think this is bad or wrong or whatever. She's like, well, I just can't tell my family that I'm coming to you. And I'm like, well, no worries. This is confidential. All my sessions are completely confidential, so don't worry about it. But, I don't know exactly why. I don't know exactly what the prohibition would be, other than don't do anything spiritual that is not specifically our religion. We are not, I guess in a way, I understand there's certain passages of certain religious texts that say don't go to soothsayers or astrologers or whatever you have. Here's Phoebe. Phoebe likes to get involved with the videos. Phoebe's a shaman cat. She likes to use me as furniture sometimes. Phoebe, that's rude, showing everybody the back of your tail while I'm doing a video. Anyway, that's Phoebe. And so, the problem is not, shamanism, there's no dogma, so shamanism doesn't have any issue with whatever your spiritual belief system is. And like I said, I know people who are Jewish, who are Christian, who are Buddhist, that are also shamanic practitioners in their own right. So certainly people who practice any sort of paganism or heathenry or whatever, and certain forms of witchcraft are very shamanically oriented. Some are not. Some forms of witchcraft are not shamanic, but there are schools of witchcraft that are very shamanic. In fact, they might even refer to themselves as shamanic witchcraft, and those things play really nicely together. Shamanism is magic, so is witchcraft, so is, in my opinion, so is prayer, and so is, you know, making a wish and blowing out birthday candles. Those are all, in my opinion, forms of magic. And so that's kind of it for the belief systems. I've talked about shamanic ethics in another video, and again, there's a wide, because there's no book, there's no dogma, there's no thou shalt nots in shamanism. Shamanic ethics are kind of all over the place as well. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that's interesting. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you are not. You can also become a member of the channel, which supports this channel, but also you'll get access to things like members only videos and stuff like that. And at some point I'll be doing members only lives. So once we get a critical mass of members who are interested in going live with me, we will do that, and we'll do, you know, all kinds of cool shamanic stuff together. So with that, I will leave you, and love you all. Talk to you very soon.